Tim Marks, the Viking, coming at you again from the garage. Why the garage? Because a lot of successful businesses start in somebody's garage. So anyhow, I want to talk to you about building a team. Well, more specifically, holding a team together, because some people can build a team. They did that at work or whatever. How do you hold a team together, and maybe even a volunteer army for a little bit, right? So how do you hold a team together? I'm going to talk about the science side, not maybe the art side right now. Several videos could be done on the art side and all the nuances. I just want to give you some ways to track your team and how do you hold it together. And this is more of a learning tool for you and I to use, so we can find out where maybe our weak spots are and our strong spots are on the art side, okay? So clarity, confidence, commitment, competence, and communication are the 5 C's we're going to talk about. Clarity, you got to know where you're going. My business mentor, Pete, he told me a couple sessions ago, I said, you know, I laid out my business, where everything was at, and of course he's got me doing this whole big old goals program thing. It's a book. And anyhow, according to all that, where am I at, and where's my business at, and what should I do, where's my position? He said, you need to be the visionary. So talk to your coach or mentor and figure out, where do you fit in? Where's your strengths? Where's your weaknesses? What are the things you can work on? What's the best attributes that you can bring to the team to help the team move forward, okay? So that's the first thing, is you got to know your position. So the first C is clarity. I got to know where I'm going, and I got to know where my team is going. You don't want to have 7 different directions that your team's going in at once. For instance, if you're building a compensated marketplace with us right now, one of the things you should be focused on heavily is going double MVP and getting to Breckenridge, and then helping other people go double MVP and getting to Breckenridge. And then certainly there's profit sharing, different things you can do. And what I find is a lot of people, they try to run all these incentives and promotions and try to get all this stuff done just so their team will grow faster. Sometimes that works, but I would just say that if you have a few things going on, make sure they dovetail together and they work together towards that common goal of getting a bunch of people to hit this Breckenridge, whatever ultimately is to help them make money. I know there's a race out there to add 100 new customers on a training, and all that's good. It all ties together. Just make sure you don't get too convoluted. How do you figure that out? You talk to your moving on coach or mentor, okay? So that's number 1, clarity. You got to know where you're going. Number 2, confidence. I have to have a confidence so people will follow me. If my confidence isn't where it needs to be right now, then honestly, that's okay. So that maybe that's something you lean on one of your leaders in your team for until you can build your confidence. Ultimately, you're going to have confidence to lead a team. But you know, maybe you're more of a introvert. I'm actually naturally an introvert, and you can focus on some of the administrative stuff in the beginning while you learn confidence. By the way, there's a book called Confidence of the Champion. You might want to check out. So confidence, to me, I think, actually in my book, I think Confidence of Champion, or maybe it's Voyage of the Viking, but I think Confidence of Champion, I wrote about this in one of the first big battles of the Civil War. Stonewall Jackson was questioned by one of his captains. They just got done with this battle. They lost 300 and some men. He got shot in the hand. And this is in the movie Gods and Generals, it was portrayed. And basically, he sat down in front of this guy, and the guy asked him, "Sir, how is it," this captain's asking Stonewall Jackson, he said, "How is it that you can be so calm and surreal on the battlefield with shells and bullets flying about your head?" And he looked back at him, and he was bent down. He looked up at him. He said, "Captain Smith, my religious beliefs teach me to feel as safe in bed as I do on the battlefield, or on the battlefield as I do in bed. And God has fixed a time for my death. I don't concern myself with that." He said, here's the line. He said, "I believe all men should live that way. That way all men would be equally brave." So having confidence, it takes time to develop. Having that kind of confidence, which I agree with what Stonewall Jackson believes for sure. And you don't have to. I'm just telling you that's what I believe. You got to have something that you're that confident about. The next one is commitment. So if you don't have this confidence, Stonewall Jackson, you better at least have some commitment. Now, commitment does not mean I'm going to wait until everything's perfect and I'll build this team. Once I get all this stuff lined up, then I'll build a team and the products are right and the website. That is not the thinking of an entrepreneur. Can I just say that? That's the thinking of an employee. If you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want to build a team, you have to be willing to be committed, even when things aren't exactly like you like them, okay? Competence. Once you're committed and you have some confidence, even if you're lacking a little bit of confidence, but you're committed, then next one is competence. You have to have some competence so people will follow you, okay? Then communication. You got to be able to communicate with your team, let them know where you're going, yada, 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 okay? And by the way, I'm not saying be Pollyanna, but another thing that popped out of me in Gods in General, Stonewall Jackson, actually one of his guys was coming off the field. They were getting, the rebels were getting overrun, or the South, whatever you want to call them. They were getting overrun, and Jackson's sitting on his horse, and this guy's walking by him. He looked up and he said, General, the day's not with us today. And he looks down at him, he said, if you feel that way, he said, if you feel that way. He didn't agree with him. He said, if you feel that way, you better not tell anybody else. And so in other words, even though they're getting their butt kicked, don't tell anybody else. Now, I'm not saying shouldn't deal with problems, and General Jackson certainly dealt with the problems and ended up going on to win that particular battle. So he did deal with it, but it doesn't do any good to go around to him. You follow me? Okay. So here's the deal. I would suggest that everybody do something like this to track your team, see where your team's at, and this is a learning tool. For you and I, I've used this for years, and some of my top leaders are using it, have used it for years. This is a tool for you and I to use, so we know exactly, here's where my strengths are, here's the areas I need to improve in, and here's each one of my individual teammates, okay? So they're not just a number, they're not just some points on a screen or whatever. So I wrote some names up here of a team you might be working on. Fred, Barney, Wilma, Betty, and Mr. Slate. Some of these might look familiar to you, okay? So what I'll do is I'll draw that out on a piece of paper typically, and I'll write Fred. What do I know about Fred? So Fred's a newer guy that got started, or maybe he's a guy that's been around for a while. Doesn't really matter. You want to do this exercise with everybody on your team. So Fred, what do I know about him? He likes bowling. You know, he wants to get out of the rock quarry. He wants to be free. He doesn't like being on that dinosaur cranking that handle all day. And he is a yes man. Fred is definitely a yes man. He's not a natural born leader. Fred has got some low confidence, I would say. Barney, the guy that got started after Fred, man, the only reason he likes bowling is because of Fred. Barney's even more of a yes man, but he's got potential. And Barney's wife, Betty, we put her in separately maybe. She's as nice as she could be, but you know what? Betty just cares about being a mom. But if you look at Wilma, who is Fred's wife, Wilma, she's a strong leader. She actually wears the pants in the house. So I want to write that down. She wears the pants. She sometimes can put Fred down. So I know what books I'm going to have her read. I'm going to have my wife talk to her, get her some help, and get them aligned, right? So they work together. Now, every couple works together a little bit differently, but there are some simple principles that work where if you violate those, no matter who's more comfortable doing what, it just won't work long term, okay? So these are some things I want to do, and I want to do that every person on my team. And then Mr. Slate, now Mr. Slate, he's just a blowhard. You know who he is, right? He's the boss down at the gravel pit. He's a level 1 leader. He's a positional leader. He writes the paycheck, so everybody has to do what Mr. Slate says. So he expects everybody to do that for him. Well, the facts are, when you're leading a business where people are basically volunteering in the beginning, you have to be able to inspire them. And it's really hard to be in a people business if they don't like you. So Mr. Slate's going to have to read some books. So when I put Blowhard, he's a level 1 leader. I'm also going to put maybe some books I could recommend at some point in time. But I need to spend time with him because he's probably got a low self-image. That's why he acts that way, okay? So then I also want to look at the folks on my team and figure out where they're at. Are they learning, associating, reading? Do they have a spouse, kids, pets? Do they have a college degree? What's their temperament? How much time have I invested in them, et cetera, et cetera? These are all things I want to look at. Why? That way I know what they need to develop, and I can see where I'm working and spending my time. For instance, if I keep showing up to Fred's house to try to get him going, but Fred is not even willing to learn at all, and all he wants to do is fight with Wilma, but he's not willing to deal with any of that, then I got to see, okay, man, how many hours did I spend with Fred last week? I spent 3.5 hours with Fred, and there's nothing wrong with that unless Fred doesn't want to listen to the advice I'm giving. You know, there's that old saying, never try to teach a pig to sing. It's a waste of your time, and it's really annoying to the pig. And I feel that way sometimes when I try to coach and mentor some people. You know, one of the things I try to do, if I'm sitting down with my pastor or my business mentor, either one, I try to listen to what they say. Now, I'm certainly not a perfect student, but I try to listen to what they tell me and then go out and apply the things that they say. Hey, you know, like if my pastor tells me to read a book, I don't want to go sit down with them again and say, well, I didn't get time to read it. I'm going to tell them, man, I got it. I read it. here's what I got out of it, or do you want to know what I got out of it, or whatever, okay? So, so I want to watch how much time I'm spending with each person here, okay? And then all these people here have different strengths and weaknesses, okay? So maybe, you know, Betty, as I said, she's nice as she could be, but she really cares about being a mom. She just wants to be home with the kids. And I believe their kid's name was Bam Bam, right? And then the Flintstones had Pebbles, I believe, right? So she wanted to be home with Bam Bam. So is there some things that she can offer? Well, she's only going to work so much time in the business or whatever, so I'm not going to push her against whatever her commitment level is. Now, ultimately, when I build trust, we can stretch a little bit, but you want to be careful not to push people too far. And, you know, this might seem like little simple things. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you, this stuff is important. And this is what the average person doesn't do when they build a team. They don't sit down and look at where people are at. So they get one person and they push Betty and push Betty and push Betty, and they push her away and they don't know, where'd Betty go? Well, we pushed her away. Betty wasn't ready yet. Betty wasn't ready like maybe Wilma's ready to rock and roll today. Wilma's saying, Fred, get your rear in gear. Let's go out and show 100 plans. Da, 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 da. So maybe we got to get Wilma to throttle back a little bit eventually, but we don't want to tell Wilma that in the beginning. We don't want to say, Wilma, you need to start being nice to your husband and edify him. You don't want to say that. You got to take your time. You got to build a relationship with these folks and then lead them into the system. We have, for us anyways, we're leading them to the XO training system, and that in there we'll give them the basics through reading, associating, going to intro meetings, which I'd recommend you go to every week, and then the game day seminars, and of course the big game. All these things are tools that you and I can use along with the books, recommending the books. By the way, we got to read the books ourselves to help build these leaders into somebody that's going to, you know, fill in the gaps on an overall team. Now, I want to tell you right up front, you know, people are going to grow at their own speed. You and I can't make somebody grow. I've noticed this about my leadership journey. Every time I tried to make somebody into something, all I did was create division. All I did was create friction. So be very careful. What people need mostly from you is they need acceptance, approval. They need to hear that, man, I really appreciate the way that you showed the plan, or man, you're such a hungry student. I appreciate the way you show up every week. Whatever it is that they're doing right, sneak up on somebody and catch them doing something right. That's the best way to start building a team, you know. Somebody's pet dies or something like that, you better call them. You better be sensitive to that. Well, I don't care about pet. Doesn't matter. I actually have a good friend of mine right now that their pet, we're real close with them, like family, and their pet is going through some challenges, and I know what that's like. I am very close to my dogs, et cetera, so I'm able to relate there. You know, somebody has a college degree. You don't want to go around bashing college to people that are really proud of their college degree. Make them feel good about that college degree. Find out what somebody's temperament is. You know, I would probably even write that here. You know, I can't fit everything on this whiteboard, but on my piece of paper that I'm keeping track of everything, I would write, you know, Wilma is a choleric melancholy maybe, and Fred is a phlegmatic sanguine, or whatever that is. I want to write what all these temperaments are, just so I know and I can start to really understand who these players are. Hopefully this all makes sense, and you can use this to start building your team. I'll say this sheet of paper, make a sheet for each one of your teams, or maybe two, and write down each one of these people, what their attributes are, all these different things here, and add some more things there, and keep track of it, and think through it daily, and you'll start to build a foundation. I've called this the sheet for many, many years, and I know the teams that are growing the fastest are doing something similar to this, and I encourage you to do the same thing. Whether you're building a compensated marketplace, you're working on your job, or at church, whatever you're doing, whatever kind of organization you're building, this will be valuable to you. I know it's helped me a lot through the years, and hopefully it's helped you too. This has been the Viking, over and out. We'll see you next time.